In this tutorial, I want to talk about what you do after you have created your rig. In this case, you're using Rapid Rig Modular, and before you begin the skin weight painting process to make sure that painting the skin weights works as well as possible for you. And that is to create what I call a skin weight stance. This is basically a range of motion exercise. And if I'm to just kind of play through what we have here at the moment, you'll see I have my character, each individual part of him rotating a certain amount that kind of is representative of the natural degree of rotation I would expect of that particular part of the body. And this is all set up in a particular way. I have created a document here to try to explain that process and to make it easier to understand. So, as I said, the skin weight stance is a range of motion exercise. And what it does is whenever I have my character, let's say they have their leg up, for instance, right? Well, when I'm painting the skin weights, if I'm using the paint skin weights tool, every time I click on the animation control to rotate that leg, I no longer am inside the paint skin weights tool, and therefore I'm having to go back and forth a lot. It's a lot easier to just actually have some animation on my timeline, um, and that way all I need to do is to scrub my timeline basically. So I can scrub back and forth here very easily, and I won't exit outside of my paint skin weights tool that way. And when I'm doing this, because I know that this particular action is something that the character should be able to do, I can kind of use this as a guide for, where am I seeing deformations that I want? Where am I seeing deformations that I don't want? All of those kinds of ideas. And this way too, I'm only looking at a single rotation of a single joint at one time. So it's only rotating like the leg negative 90 degrees in Y, right? And then it goes back to a default T pose, and then it will go in the opposite direction. Now it's going rotate Y positive 60, and then it goes back, and then it may go to the leg swinging outward, which is now rotate Z 60. And this is a smart way to work. It's working with primarily just the FK controls because they're a lot easier to individually work from. And we set this up from frame 0. And the pattern that you'll notice here, of course, is that there's a T-pose basically every 20 frames, right? So 20, 40, 60, we have a T-pose. And in between, we have all of our other poses. And that's what we see here. If we scroll down to the table that I've created here, you'll see that all these gray values here, those are the T-poses. Sometimes there's a little extra information here that's useful. But then the more colored values here are the ones that are specific to the individual control that you need to select and the values that you need to put it at according to the frame number. So it's important to go through here and be careful about what you're doing, but it is all color coded. Different parts of the body are coded into different colors. And this will take you through 1500 frames. This is a basic setup using a humanoid character. So a humanoid character with 2 arms and 2 legs. What we are doing here is really focusing on just one side of the body. So for the most part, if we were to watch what's happening with this character, it would just be the left side like you saw with the legs there. And when we finish the left side, we are able to go through and mirror over the skin weights that we've done from the left side onto the right side, and that will, for the most part, give us the same results on one side versus the other, providing that your character is symmetrical. If you don't have a symmetrical character, then you will need to do both sides individually, and you'll need to paint those separately. So everything is a little bit dependent on the character that you're creating. If you have alternative physiology as well, where your character might have a tail or extra limbs or tentacles or something like that, then you are going to have to go through and add in those elements into the skin weight stance as well. It's best to focus on FK controls wherever possible. And use the existing kind of layout that I've done here as a guide. I start from the root and I work my way out toward the end. So if you start from the part that has the most influence over that particular section, like a tail, you start at the base of the tail, and then you would work your way down individually to the next joints on that chain until you get to the end of the tail. Okay. So with that being said, just to ensure that everything is clear here, because I am using Rapid Rig Modular, when we are setting this up, we do want to make sure that all of our tangents, before we lay out any keys whatsoever, that all of our tangents are set to linear. So I go into my animation preferences here, go to my animation settings, and ensure that my default in and out tangents are linear. Okay. If you had created keys and the tangents weren't set to linear, you can always go back and reset them using the graph editor. Another thing that's really important to point out is you want to be able to select all of the appropriate animation controls whenever you create a T-pose. And the easiest way to do that and the most reliable way to do that is to use the Rapid Rig selector. The Rapid Rig selector is just like the Rapid Rig modular feature, which we had talked about in a previous lesson. With Rapid Rig Modular, we stick some code into our graph editor. In fact, that code is just this right here, Rapid Rig _modular _v2. And if you had installed Rapid Rig Modular correctly into your Maya directory before you opened up Maya, then running this code will launch this window that you see here, which is what we used to create the rigging that we see here. If you are not familiar with Rapid Rig Modular, check it out. It's very, very useful. And you can just search for it on Google by its name. But presuming that you know how to do all of that, to get the selector to work, then you are going to use a similar code to this, except for it is going to be Rapid Rig _modular _v2 _selector. So where you would stick that is if you come into the script editor here and create a new mel window, okay, and you would take that code that I just showed you there, copy and paste, and then I would just hit Control A, Control Enter, right? And that's going to launch now this window here. And because I'm going to be using this window quite a bit, I have a little icon on my shelf, right? So you can add that to your shelf. My custom shelf is quite big. So you would just take this here, select that, and then choose this button here to add to shelf. And it'll ask you for a name. You can call it RRS for Rapid Rig Selector. When you install Rapid Rig, there are some icons that come with it, which I had used here. These are the proper icons for it, so you can link those to it. I'm not going to go into all those details in this particular tutorial. But the main thing that you will get out of this selector is, one, it is a way to select any part of the Rapid Rig setup that you've created. Like I can select the left arm clavicle here, or the left arm shoulder, etc. That's all well and good. Many rigs come with a selector system like this, but what's important for this, for our purposes, is just being able to select every control with a simple button. So I can just use this button right here, select all, and that will select all my controls. And so every time I lay out a T-pose, for every frame here where it says create a T-pose, I make sure to click select all there, and then I will set the T-pose at the default 0 values. So when you begin this, what I would recommend doing is just going through and setting a T-pose on every one of these frames. They're every 20 frames, basically starting from frame 0. And just go all the way to frame 1500 here, creating however many T-poses that is. And all you got to do is just hit S each time, basically. You haven't go from frame 0 to frame 20 and you won't have actually moved anything. So it's really easy. And then go to frame 40, just hit S again, you key everything in so long as everything is still selected here. And you've already done half the work that you need to do. So that's really simple. But then go through and follow the guide that I've given you here to then pose all these. And if we just go through it really quickly, just to show you bit by bit, you'll see we've got the hips rotating there. Got different joints in the torso rotating in different ways. There are certain rotations that are specific to certain joints, and the degree of rotation on any particular joint is dependent on essentially that part of the body and how much it would move. And depending on your character, you may have slightly different needs. The character may have slightly different needs. So if you feel like it needs to rotate more or less on any given joint, then that's up to you to put in the values that you think will work. Okay. So we got our legs here, ankles, and then we get to the point where we're doing finger controls. Now it's important to just point out that the finger controls are being controlled just by the curl feature on these. All right, so this is what I was using. That's the thumb. These are the first, second, third, and fourth fingers here. And it's just this little curl thing, which is not as accurate as going in and individually rotating each of the finger controls, but it's a way to get it done rather quickly. I don't have any individual toes on here, but if you wanted to be able to control individual toes, you could do that as well. I just have a single toe control at the end there. And then finally at the very end, just the jaw opening. We can talk about later on creating a more complex mouth, but for now, that produces us a basic jaw opening that we can work from. So with all that, that's the layout that we will then use in the following lesson to actually paint our skin weights.